So welcome everybody. I'm Lesley Jane Seymour, for those of you who don't know me, and I'm the founder of CoveyClub and former editor-in-chief of many magazines. That's probably how a lot of you know me. And I thought it's kind of weird that when I created CoveyClub, one of the first things I wanted to create was something called Coffee and Conversation. And the idea was to get together in a virtual way. And I picked coffee because I thought, wouldn't it be great to have people over every morning if you could do this? And I was just launching as an entrepreneur, but still feel like you were getting together with people every morning. Little did I know that 2 years later, here we are. It's kind of weird. And but I'm holding both because I want you to all have your coffee or whatever you need, or your chai or your thing. So raise your glasses. If you find other things necessary, we don't judge here. I just want to let you know. And to everybody, do your thing, whatever it is that makes you feel comforted and happy. And I want to thank all of you. We have 135 of you signed up. We're going to record this and we'll post it everywhere so everybody can find it. And today is the day of, ironically, International Happiness Day. Well named.
Yep.
Well named. So ironically, here we are. And, you know, I think what we have to do every morning, depending on what level you're in of confinement, containment, lockdown, whatever, make the most of it. I've put my green background in the way here so you can see it on purpose, because there's studies that show that when people look at, even if you look at nature, your heart rate goes down, you feel better. And actually they've done studies in hospital rooms that overlook the parking lot versus the garden. The garden does better, people getting better. And so I thought what we should do is, because these are crazy times and I have a lot of crazy people in my orbit, including the wonderful Wendy Perrotti. Wendy, wave your hand so everybody knows who you are.
Good morning.
There's Wendy and Dana.
Good morning.
There's Dana Hilmer. We've been working together on various projects. These guys are coaches who chased me down to do something called Camp Reinvention. And I did that with them, and they were so good that when this whole crazy thing happened, I said, we've got to do something else, and everybody's going crazy. So is there something we can do in the mornings that's regular, that makes people feel like they have a routine, that brings us together? And they said yes. And so that's what this is. It's called Positive Mornings. We're going to start off talking about things that are positive, get you on a good footing for the day. And we're going to do Friday today. This is our first day. We're going to give you the weekend off. And then we'll do the 5 days next week and see where we are. And in the little chat, if you guys know Zoom, over on the right is your little chat area. They'll ask you to put things over there. And any questions you have, links we'll put in there for you as well. And again, we're going to post the recording so you can find all of that stuff there. You can reach me. I'll put my email. They'll put their emails in there also. And we'd love to hear what you think, what we can do better, what would make you happier. And each one of these will evolve. We'll deal with a different topic each day. And I hope that this will be meaningful for you and will help all of us get going. So at the bottom on the left-hand side, if you look, there's a little microphone. Because we have so many of us, we need you to put it on mute unless you're speaking. And that way you'll be able to hear everybody. So thank you for all joining us. I'm really excited to see you all. I think Zoom really does have the capacity to make a room for us and to make us feel like we're together. And we can be together. I don't know, I'm kind of crazy, but I've been very, very happy with how Zoom makes me feel like I have all of you guys in my backyard right now. So anyway, I'm going to hang up and I will be here, but I'll be listening as well. And I'm going to turn it over to Wendy and Dana.
All right, welcome. And thank you for taking time out of your day. I know even though we're all on our various forms of confinement, we still have responsibilities and chaos around us. So thank you so much for just taking this time for yourself and for joining us and just for coming together. I think we all need, in this time especially, to come together and to feel connection. Lesley mentioned that today is the International Day of Happiness. It's actually a UN sanctioned day, and it's on March 20th every year. And the theme this year is happiness together. And I feel like that just feels so appropriate this year, especially where we just all really need and benefit from that connection. So Lesley mentioned that we're going to do a different topic each day. And so what we're going to do is start off the conversation with the topic. And we're here for you. What we're going to do the majority of the time is open up the floor so that we can hear how we can best support you. So there is a conversation in the room and that we are providing some support that you're really feeling that you need at this time. What we want to do first is just kind of get a reading of where everybody's at right now. So in the chat room, if you could, on a scale of one to 5, right where you're at. 1 is, I feel pretty much the same as normal. And 5 is, this whole thing is freaking me out. On a scale of 1 to 5, where are you feeling this morning?
We got a 4.5, 3, 3.7, 3, a 6.
We've got 1, 2, 3.5, 4. Yep. 2, 1 to 10, depending.
Lesley.
I hear you, depending on the minute. Unsure. Yep. 4, 2. Feeling good, normal. 6. Yep. 5.
We're all over the map.
Yeah, all over the map. And it doesn't surprise me, actually, Lesley. I think your comment is perfect on depending on the moment, right? Because at any moment we open the news and we hear something new. And yeah, so everybody's all over. I'm still reading everybody's numbers here: 6, 6, 5, 3 to 4. Absolutely. So I think, first of all, we need to give ourselves permission to be human. My background's in positive psychology and coaching. And one of the phrases of my teacher, Tal Ben Shahar, was we need to give ourselves permission to be human, because a lot of times we think that to be happy, we need to be walking around with a smiley face all the time. And the reality is that is simply not true, nor is it realistic. We need to be grounded in whatever the reality is of the moment and make choices in every given moment on how we want to show up, what we want to focus on, and what we want to do, the actions that we want to take. And so giving ourselves permission to be human right now is giving ourselves permission to feel the anxiety and the fear and to be aware of it, but to not let it take over. So for example, the media, depending on how much media you want to watch, you may find that it's elevating your stress level. And so having a media diet, so to speak, may be really helpful at this time so that you can be aware of what's going on without being obsessed by it. Because we need to be grounded in the reality. And we need to embrace what's good. We need to embrace what is still good and beautiful and what we love in our life. And that's really what we're focusing on today, especially since it's the International Day of Happiness, is focusing on positivity. And one thing I want to share with you is, as it relates to our happiness, once all of our basic human needs are met, about 40% of our happiness is based on the choices that we make every day. Only 10% of our happiness level is based on external circumstances. So those are the circumstances that are big and exciting, like, a wedding or a graduation or whatever it happens to be. It's also the circumstances that are challenging, like what we're all dealing with right now. So only about 10% of our happiness is based on that external stuff, which means a full 40% is based on what we choose to focus on, how we choose to show up, and on those little choices that we make in every moment. And these little choices really add up. And that's what we're going to talk about today. There's a beautiful quote by Viktor Frankl. I love this quote. He says that between stimulus and response, there's a space. So between that thing that happened and how you're going to respond to it, there's a space. And in that space is the power to choose your response. And in that response lies your growth and your freedom. So today, what we're talking about is that space, right? That ability to choose your response. at any given moment, we have a choice, and we forget that at times because we're creatures of habit. But we need to remind ourselves that at any point we have a choice of what we want to focus on, what we want to do, what we want to believe, how we're going to treat others. We have a choice on all of that in every given moment, and we need to remind ourselves so that we don't act out of habit. There's some beautiful research by Barbara Fredrickson, and I won't go down the research rabbit hole, but what I do want to share with you is something she calls the positivity ratio. And simply what it is, if you think of a ratio as a numerator and a denominator, she talks about how if you have a ratio of 3-to-1 to about 7-to-1 of positive experiences to negative experiences, you are in a place of being able to thrive and to flourish and see possibilities and be in a place where you can operate in an optimal way. So we humans have a negativity bias. We tend to focus on the negative, and that's probably why we're drawn completely to the news that's going on today. We are drawn to the negative, and we tend to take in and remember the negative. That's what we remember because it's our brain trying to keep us aware of everything that's going on to keep us safe. So we need to be very intentional as humans to make sure that we have enough positive experiences and positive emotions to counteract the negative, right? And it's kind of that ratio and that balance. So I'm sure all of you have noticed that when you're in a funk, right? When you're in that place where you're just feeling funky, overwhelmed, depressed, anxious, we tend to kind of see the world through a lens that's about this narrow. We don't see possibilities. We don't see the things that are good around us. We don't think creatively. We just put ourselves in this little box. We kind of bounce around in this box when we're in that negative space. But when we can increase that ratio to 3-to-1, 4-to-1, 5-to-1, up to about 7-to-1, now all of a sudden that box expands and we can see possibilities. We can realize the good stuff that's around us. We can be creative. We can come up with solutions. We really are operating in a completely different way. And so what we want to talk about today are what are some of those things that you can do to increase the positivity and to decrease the negative. So in the chat box, actually, I'd love to hear all of you chime in on what is one thing you can do today, even for 5 or 10 minutes, that will simply be a positive experience for you. What is one thing that you can do today? And if you don't have anything in mind, create it right now. Meditate, sit in the sun. Ooh, that sounds nice.
No sun here in
Hug
Connecticut.
my daughter. Yes, continue my 30-day yoga series, walk outside, online yoga, garden, baking brownies, cook. Oh, these are beautiful.
Reach out and speak to someone. Right on.
Dance with my mom. That's beautiful. Online workout, walking outside. So beautiful. And these are those things that make up the good life, right? And these things are still very much with us right now. I think what we need to remember is that when we're in a place of overwhelm, of fear, of anxiety, of uncertainty, of being completely freaking stressed out, all of those things that are still good are right there, and they're waiting for us to notice, right? They're all right there. And this in no way means to be Pollyannaish. This in no way means to negate the things that are challenging. It's simply being intentional about still giving yourself permission to experience joy, giving yourself permission to still access those things in your life that are really good. And what's beautiful about the positivity ratio is she talks about how, we're all so busy and sometimes it's hard to plan that, great outing. The good news is, as you saw on the list, to increase your positivity, it's just those things that you do for 5 minutes, for 10 minutes, those little snippets of time. And if you can be intentional throughout your day to just add a little bit of that positive, that one hugging the daughter, baking brownies, whatever those beautiful small moments are, to be intentional about adding more of them. And because it's a ratio, also be intentional about what can you do to decrease the things that are negative to you, that are sucking you dry, that are drawing you down. I know for me right now, that negative thing that just sucks me dry and completely hijacks my brain is listening to too much news. Everybody has a different tolerance. For me, it's morning and night, and I do a midday New York Times homepage check-in, and then it's off. I just feel like it hijacks my brain. it does nothing for me that allows me to move forward. So whatever that is for you, I'd love to hear in the chat box as well. What are some of those negative things that are just kind of dragging you down that you could do a little bit less of today? Getting ready to plant seedlings. I'm seeing more positive stuff. This is great. Online museum tours. Look at the bulbs coming up from last year that you planted. Beautiful. And what are some of the things that you can do a little bit less of that are draining you? So I see Andrea says a little bit less media, sucked into Twitter, negative news, less news. More meditation, less news. Yes, definitely less media. Less sugar. Less social media. Yeah. Less sugar. Shifting focus. Beautiful. Less wine. Less news. Huge, huge shout out to less news right now, right? It's really just dragging us down. Being nice to my husband. Less technology, getting enough sleep. Yeah. Beautiful. So our challenge to you today is to be super intentional, not just today, but through this whole experience, and hopefully this is something you'll practice and continue, is to ask yourself in any given moment, and certainly in the morning, what can I do today that's going to increase my positivity? Just to enjoy something because. And this is especially true when we're crazy busy, we're running around, we're checking off the do list, we got all these things we got to do. You can still, even on those craziest days, take 2 minutes here and 2 minutes there just to do something that is going to elevate your sense of well-being. And what's beautiful is this positivity. It's called the positivity spiral. Because you've experienced this positive thing, that feeling is going to trickle throughout your day. We all know how the negativity trickles, right? That negativity drags us down throughout the day, but so does the positive. The positive brings us up throughout the day. So it's being super intentional to add more of that in your life. And again, being a ratio to decrease more of that negative, that stuff that's draining us. So I wanted to share too, in all of our conversations, Wendy and I are going to bring forth different aspects of this well-being, positivity, happiness, mindset. We're going to be bringing in different conversations. What we'd love to do, listening to Glennon Doyle's new book on audio, it's wonderful. Is that Untamed? Is that right, Stephanie? I've heard great things about it. Beautiful. She's an amazing writer. Less nagging my teenagers. These are all so great.
Christine, totally going to do the lipstick thing.
Yes.
That's a fantastic idea. Yeah. Try all your lipsticks while you're home by yourself to see which ones work and which ones don't. Beautiful.
Dana, can you post the list of books up? Yes, I'd be happy to. I'll do that in a moment when we open up the floor. So Wendy and I, we want to be here for you and to meet you where you're at. And so what we'd love to do right now is hear your thoughts in the chat room as to how we can best support you in this moment. And what we'll do is we'll call on a few of you. We'll get as many as we can to hear a few voices in the room, what's showing up for you, and how can we best support you at this time.
So this is a chance if you're feeling a little bit stressed out, or if you've got a great idea that you want to share, pop it into the chat so we can call on you and either do a little bit of coaching or do a little bit of sharing. We want to hear from you. Don't be shy.
I have moments of terror, not about catching anything, but how we're treating each other.
Yeah. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, and can you reinstate the question? Our question's really twofold. One is, how can we best support you right now? So if one of you has a question or something that's showing up that you'd love some support on, we'd love to invite you into the room and we'd love to provide some coaching support. So that's number one. Number two is if you are finding that there's something that is working for you to keep you positive, to keep you in that good headspace, please put it in there because we can all benefit from that.
Yeah, so I'm seeing Katie popped up a couple of times with concerns about She has a college-age son who's really worried, and it's hard to stay positive for our kids. So, Katie, if you unmute yourself, tell us a little bit about where you are right now, and let us chime in with you.
Hi, I'm Katie. So I don't know how old, if people on this forum have children or how old they are. My kids are both in college, and I think this whole process has been very destabilizing for them in their own separate ways. My son returned to school after a 3-semester absence and was doing really well. He feels like the rug was pulled out from under him. He was on break, asked to not return, and Lucy was on vacation, went back to school. 4 days later, they were asked to vacate. So everything is, and this is also a generation that just hasn't experienced a crisis. I think many of us have gone through various world events. And for example, my son was misinterpreting my lack of apparent anxiety as a lack of concern. And I explained that I was living in Paris in the 90s when there were bomb scares all the time, and I was more scared of being blown up in a supermarket than getting coronavirus. But I sometimes find it hard to be positive. I don't want to lie about everything, but I also don't want to project, my occasional doomsday emotions onto my kids, because they don't need to see their parents feeling insecure.
Yeah. First of all, I have 2 kids, a daughter and a son, in almost identical circumstances. My son was in his first semester back at Berkeley and really rocking it, and feels like the rug got pulled out from him. And my daughter had just gotten back to college when they told her, after spring break, when they told her pack up and come home. And I think a lot of our kids, Dana's got kids in high school who are about to graduate. Kids are feeling like everything that was routine that we could control is no longer in our control. And that makes it complicated for us as parents, because you're right, Katie, we don't want to put a Pollyanna rose-colored glasses thing on reality. And we also don't want to run around like Henny Penny saying the sky is falling, the sky is falling. So this is really about it, modeling for our kids, because they learn more about from how we behave than from what we say. So showing your kids the full range of your emotion is really, really helpful. When you see something on the news that makes you gasp, you can say, holy cow, that's scary. And you know what, though? I've lived through scary before, right? Mm-hmm. One of the things I've been telling my clients is something like coronavirus illustrates for us a reality that we don't recognize because our lives are so routine. Every day is pretty much the same for most of us. We have our ups and downs, but there are things that we can count on. And so we get this false sense of security that we've got control over what's going on in the world. And something like coronavirus upends us and makes us feel like, holy smokes, we don't have control over anything. When in fact, we never did, right? If you've ever won the lottery, if you've ever gotten a scary diagnosis, if you've ever been in an accident, you know that life changes on a dime. We don't have actual control. And while that might seem scary to our kids, what we can teach them and model for them is that it's not. It's not, because that is the reality of human existence. And once we understand that within that reality, the thing that we always can control is what we think, what we buy into, and what we choose to do based on that, all of a sudden, nothing can pull the rug out from under us anymore, because that's the actual reality. And so this is an opportunity to kind of teach that to our kids, both through modeling and through open conversation with them. It sounds like you're doing a really good job of straddling both worlds with them, and allowing them to show up, right? And say what they think. It's okay to tell your kids, you know what? Tell me what's in your head, even the crazy stuff, right? Because it's those crazy thoughts that we tend to hold back. And what if the world implodes and we lose our house and we lose our, and never get to go back to school, and those little thoughts that run in the back of our mind, those are the insidious things that suck the life out of us, right? So once you allow your kids, it's okay to give voice to that. We've all got crazy thoughts in our heads. And when we give voice to those big what ifs, then we have an opportunity to play with it. Go ahead and answer the question. What if that did happen? I had a client yesterday on the phone with me who said, what if I lose my business? I'm self-employed. My husband's self-employed. Well, what if? And what if? And what if? And we kind of got down to the point where she said, well, I'll be on the streets, and then I'll be in a homeless shelter. And well, what if that happened? Well, I probably would end up being the most useful person in that homeless shelter. Crazy little thing. It's never going to happen to this woman. She's a go-getter. She's going to figure it out in life. But something happens to your brain when you answer the questions, what if? You kick in that problem-solving ability. And once your brain knows that it's going to solve the problem, no matter how crazy it gets, it relaxes. So opening up the conversation, allowing yourself and your kids to have real talks about, wow, you should hear some of the crazy stuff that's in the back of my head. And that's cool. It happens to us all, but it's not our reality. Is that helpful? Whoop, you're muted. I think she gave us the thumbs up. She can't get herself off mute. All right, thanks.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. Yeah. I mean, what are you going to do? What I've been trying to tell my friends is, I think it's also really important to validate their emotions and not say, oh, come on, everything's going to be fine. I think you have to tell your kids, it's okay to be anxious. This is normal. This is unusual. So I've been trying to do that.
Yeah.
The validation part.
Thank you for bringing that up. Absolutely spot on, Katie. That nothing about positivity is ever suck it up, buttercup. It's never pretend that everything is groovy. It's looking at the actual reality and then finding our piece of what we can control and what we can choose to do within that.
Thank you.
I'm actually putting in a book momentarily here called Everything is Figure-Outable by Marie Forleo. If you don't know Marie Forleo, I love Marie TV, which is a web show that she does. But she recently launched this book called Everything is Figure-Outable. And the underlying premise of the book is to hold the belief that everything is indeed figure-outable, right? That if you can go through life with that fundamental belief, you know what? You start being able to figure everything out. And Wendy touched on this briefly, that our beliefs lead to our thoughts, and our thoughts lead to our actions and our results, right? So if we can approach, kind of look at the beliefs that we have and question them in such a way that we want to make sure that the beliefs that we have are supporting the goal, the results that we want. And I'm trying to take a bigger conversation and make it smaller, but we'll probably get into this in more detail in one of the future conversations. But our belief structure is really important. And so what came up for me in this conversation is, with our kids, if we can model for them that, yes, this is scary, and yes, there's uncertainty, and yes, there's an undercurrent of all of us being, kind of anxious and not knowing what's going on, and we can figure this out, right? It's holding the place for the and, right? That yes, things are scary, and we can figure it out. Yes, things are uncertain, and we can focus on what's good in our life. I'm feeling stressed, and I have so much good that's in my life, right? So it's holding a place for the and that is so important here, to not focus only on that thing that is dragging us down, that is sucking us dry, that is making us anxious, right? Which is what's going on right now pervasively in the media. To keep holding this place for, and there is good, and there's things that I can do, and a lot is out of control, and there are some things I can control, right? To hold that place for the end, right? There's always an opposite side that we can look at, that we can control, that we can choose, that we can, that we can choose. And a lot of that may be just an attitude that we can choose, or the choice of what to focus on in any given moment. Actually, as it relates to happiness, a big part of our happiness is the ability to choose what you want to focus on. Because in any given day, I mean, it can be a beautiful day, a gorgeous day, and we can choose to focus on the one thing that annoys the crap out of us, right? Even on a gorgeous day, we can choose to focus on that one negative little nilly thing that's driving us crazy. And it can drag down your whole day. And the flip side is true. You can have a day that's, seeped in a lot of anxiety and uncertainty. And if you choose to focus on the baking the brownies, the hugging the daughter, the things that you all said, if those are the things that you're choosing to focus on, that's going to dictate the kind of day that you have. When I do some speaking engagements, a lot of times I start the conversation with, raise your hand. How many of you are having a great day, right? How many of you are having a mediocre day? How many of you are having a really shitty day? And I use that line of questioning to bring out the point that the kind of day that you're having is largely dictated by what you're choosing to focus on. And I think that's a huge thing to think about, especially in days like today that are so challenging, that the kind of day that you're going to have is going to be based on what you're choosing to focus on. So if you're focusing on the media and it's drawing you down, make a different choice. Make a different choice to focus on something that's going to bring you up, to focus on a project or something that you want to create that's an opportunity, or a person you want to connect with, right? Make a different choice, because that's the kind of day, in any day, that we're going to have. It's based on what you choose to focus on. I'm actually going to put the book, Everything is Figure Outable, in the chat. I love Marie's voice and her way of explaining things. She talks a lot about beliefs and how important the beliefs are to the actions that we take. And if we believe that the sky is falling right now, we're going to start acting from that place. If we believe that, you know what, this sucks and it's going to pass and we can figure it out, that is what we're going to lean into, right? So be really conscious of what's going on in your head right now and the beliefs and the stories that you're creating around this, because those are the things that you're going to act on. And make sure you're creating empowering beliefs that'll move you forward in a more positive way. I see from Katie, yep, happiness, can you go over that 40%, 10%, and what accounts for the remaining 50%? Yeah. So there's research that shows that about 50% of our happiness and our well-being is kind of based on that kind of biological kind of genetics that we all have. I'm sure you all know people that naturally are kind of a little more optimistic, a little more positive all the time, and some people that maybe skew the other direction. About 50% is that. 10% of your happiness is based on external circumstances. And by the way, these percentages assume that your basic human needs are met, that you have shelter, you have food, right? So assuming those things are met. So about 10% of your happiness is based on external circumstances. And I find this really fascinating, because a lot of times people think, I will be happy when I get into college. I will be happy when I get to that big house. I will be happy when I finally meet a spouse. I will be happy when... No, that's 10% of what your happiness is, are those big moments, right? Or those external things. Likewise, when things are negative, like they are right now, when things are challenging than when they are right now, only about 10% of your happiness is based on that. A full 40% is based on the choices that you make every day. And so throughout our time together, we really encourage you to join us over the course of next week. We'll be touching on more of those things that you can do to elevate your happiness. So, for point of just kind of giving you an overview, some of those things are gratitude, are being present and being mindful, are the quality of your relationships, the quality of your relationships is number one as it relates to your happiness. And here we have this beautiful opportunity right now to focus on our relationships. Quality of your relationships is number one as a predictor of your happiness and your well-being. Gratitude, of course, the choice of what to focus on, the positivity ratio that we talked about today. There are so many things that we can do that are in our control. And those are the things that we're going to be talking about over the course of our week together that'll help elevate our happiness and our well-being, not only just now while things are uncertain and scary, but also as we move forward in our life. So we will definitely be going into each one of those in more detail.
You know, Dana just brought up the quality of our relationships, and there was a study at Harvard. It's the longest study of its kind ever, the longest and largest study. It went through generations. They're now calling it the happiness study. But initially, they took two groups of Harvard men 80 years ago. This study's been going on for 80 years. And they said, what makes a man successful and fulfilled? And, you know, it was all men back then doing this stuff. And they said, we're going to take this group of college elite fellas, and we're going to take this group of men from South Boston, completely different education, completely different socioeconomic backgrounds. They did test them out for markers of health and resilience and certain things. So they felt like personality-wise and health-wise, human-wise, they were starting with as apples to apples as they could. And they studied these men throughout their life. And then they started studying their children, and then their children's children. And for 80 years, they have followed the generations of these initial Harvard men to answer the question, what makes for a successful, fulfilled life? And what they discovered, number one, was across the board, more than anything else, if you were satisfied with your relationships, meaning that those who were as connected as they wanted to be, right? So this doesn't mean if you're an introvert and you like to have only 3 friends and an extrovert has 500 friends, that you're going to be less happy. It's if you are as truly connected as you want to be, everything in your life feels successful and fulfilled. And we're capable of doing that. Clearly you're all rock stars at that because you showed up to make a connection with one another and with us today, right? And you're here talking about how you can connect with your colleagues. I'm seeing it in the chat, and your kids and your family and your friends. Those are the things that turn the tide. And we, Lesley, Dana, and I were having a conversation actually about this little morning talk, saying how, what are the things that we want to deliver? What are some of the things that are important that are out there right now? And we did what humans do. We started sharing our stories with one another. We started saying, oh my gosh, this is going on with, Dana was talking about her son who's graduating high school and who may not get to go to his graduation. And her other son same son, just won state champions in fencing, can't go to the tournament, right? And Lesley was talking, so we're talking about these stories of, oh my God, that's so sad. And oh, that's awful. And those are important stories for us to share with one another. And yet, there comes a point where in the sharing of those stories, even though those negative stories connect us with one another, it deflates our energy. And I watched as Dana and Lesley were having this conversation with one another. It was a gorgeous conversation, and they were so with each other. But I saw them both like deflate on the screen. And then Lesley said, I saw this thing, and these moms were posting pictures of pillow forts, and kids are making pillow forts all over the place. And Lesley's like all twinkly and bright-eyed and hilarious now, and she's telling us the story, and she's animated. And Dana chimes in, and oh my gosh, we're still sharing stories of coronavirus, only now we're sharing positive stories, and the energy in the Zoom room, even, we're not even in person, goes up, 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 up. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that you can do, like right now, to Katie's point, let's not shut anybody down. Let's hear the reality of their stories. Let people tell their tales and empathize. Let's talk about those real emotions that are not happy emotions. And let's introduce stories into those conversations about the other side of what's going on, about the connections that are happening, about the innovation and creativity. My daughter's on YouTube constantly, and she showed me this kid who created this song about he said it's called "Let's Quarantine Together." It's a love song. Hilarious, beautiful little song. There are ways that we can shift the conversation while still listening and empathizing fully into things that elevate the overall vibration. Because guess what? Energy is every bit as contagious as coronavirus, maybe even more.
Yeah. I love that you phrase it that way. And happiness is also contagious, by the way, right? I remember hearing an analogy I thought was so beautiful, that when you're positive, when you're happy, when you're just showing up in the most high energy way, it's like lighting a candle in a room, right? You can light one candle and you can light numerous candles, and now that whole room lights up because your energy, your happiness is truly contagious. A couple things I wanted to address in the chat. One is there's some talk going on about Brene Brown and her work on vulnerability. And one of you commented about being vulnerable and kind of having a challenge. I'm afraid I might be paraphrasing incorrectly because I read it a few minutes ago, but a challenge being vulnerable with those that you love. Brene Brown is a researcher. She researches the emotions of vulnerability and shame and engagement. And her work is so beautiful. She has quite a few TED Talks. She also has a Netflix series. So if you have time to watch TV now, her Netflix series is called A Call to Courage. And it's a beautiful summary of the work that she does. But what she talks about, and this relates to the comment I saw in the chat box, is how we as humans are all vulnerable. Every single moment we're vulnerable, and loving someone, of course, is the most vulnerable thing that we could ever do. We are vulnerable, and there's no choice as to whether or not you're going to experience vulnerability. But the people that have good relationships, the people that make dreams happen, the people that are going for the things that really matter to them, they are just as vulnerable. The only difference between them and the people that don't do those things is they choose to lean into it. They choose to engage with it. So they are vulnerable, they are fearful, they are uncertain, they are feeling all that other stuff that we're feeling, right? They're choosing to step in anyway. They're choosing to engage anyway. And so if you are inspired by this work, I can put in the chat room again, her Netflix show is called A Call to Courage. She has a couple of TED Talks that are best-selling or best viewed, most watched TED Talks. I think the biggest one is just simply called Vulnerability. And she has several books that I'd recommend as well. One is called Daring Greatly. One is called Braving the Wilderness. Her most recent one is Dare to Lead. But all of their books, the kind of the undercurrent, speaks about how we as humans, the thing that holds us back is this vulnerability, this uncertainty. But the moment we can choose to lean into it, the moment that we can choose to engage with it, that's when beautiful things happen. Also, one of the questions in the chat box I saw was how to quote unquote fix a relationship. And I don't want to lean into the word fix because you have to know a lot more about the relationship to truly address anything like that. But what I'd like to do is share with you some of the things that you can do to elevate the quality of the relationships that you have. And this could be a relationship with a spouse or a lover. This could be a relationship with anybody in your life, a coworker or a friend or a child, right? So some of the things that you can do, one, of course, is to prioritize spending time with them. They actually show that with children, if you can spend just 5 minutes or 10 minutes uninterrupted, looking at them in the eyes, that's why I'm doing this, being with them, looking at them in the eyes, and talking with them and listening to them, not interrupting, not multitasking, right? Which is what we all do, right? We're all doing a zillion things, but looking at them in the eye, and listening to them on what they want to talk about or what their interest is, you can actually ward off at least 80% of the behaviors that are not the behaviors you want your child to have, simply because you have filled their bucket. You have spent that time with them in a way that is focused. And it could be 5 minutes at one time in the day, 5 minutes at another time in the day, ideally for a total of 10 minutes a day, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it actually kind of is, because those of you that are moms, we know that we're multitasking. And, you know, honestly, if we really ask ourselves, there's probably many days where we don't truly spend 10 minutes being 100% present. But when you're 100% present with a child, that wards off those type of behaviors that are negative. So same thing holds true with any relationship that we have. As soon as we can be 100% present and 100% listening and having that person be heard, it's a huge shift in the relationship. One of the phrases that my teacher used and I loved, he said, to seek to know and to be known. So to show up in the relationship in such a way that you seek to know and to be known, which means you seek to know them. You want to know that person for all of their lumps and their bumps and their imperfections, to really know who they are. Not this rosy image that they want to project, but to really know who they are and to listen in such a way that you create that space to really know who they are. And then the flip side is for you to step into vulnerability so that you can be known for who you are, right? A lot of times we want to kind of have the people in our life think that we're all fine, we're all this, we're all that. The reality is we all have these insecurities and these limiting beliefs and fears and all this stuff that's undercurrent. But if you can lean in to having the people that are closest in your life know you and you know them, that is one of the biggest things that you can do for a relationship. I remember in our positive psychology program, one of the most profound exercises was probably one of the most simple. And it was a listening exercise. And the prompt was, how are you? How are you really? And for 3 minutes, we had a listening partner. And for 3 minutes, all that person could do was listen with kind eyes. Just listen with kind eyes. No interjecting, oh, me too, I get that, like none of that. No interrupting, no telling their stories. For 3 solid minutes to listen with kind eyes. And I can't tell you the number of Kleenex boxes that were being passed around that room. It became so evident that we're not used to being listened to, right? To be really listened to. And it was very vulnerable. And it was so beautiful. And it made you realize that, oh my gosh, if I spent just 3 minutes truly listening, the impact that you can have on your relationships is so profound. So to truly spend time with people and to listen is a huge thing with your relationships. Another is to appreciate, to show gratitude towards those people. And we'll get into appreciation and gratitude in one of our other conversations, but to truly appreciate somebody elevates the relationship. And it's probably one of the biggest gifts that you can give to your relationship is to show a person what you appreciate about them and to show gratitude on a consistent basis.
So while we're talking about communication and connection, Rebecca Kavanaugh, you posted in the very beginning when we asked our question about feeling terror, not about getting coronavirus, but about how we treat one another. Would you be willing to unmute your mic and talk to us a little bit about that?
Sure. I think it's just that, I kind of thought maybe this would bring us more all together. But it seems like people just have this meanness. And I realize it's a lot about being fearful. But it just, I don't know, for some reason it just hurts my heart.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the toilet paper scare and politically people attacking one another and people judging one another. It happens when we're afraid, right? It happens when we're afraid. And here's the thing. We can't control other people's fear. We just can't. But there are things that we can do to help shift the fear in ourselves and in others. And in order to do that, we need a basic understanding of what happens in the human mind and what we're, and I promise I won't go all brain geek on you guys. I'll make this really quick. But what happens is you have these two parts of your brain that act together, right? You've got that limbic part of your brain, and in that part of your brain, your emotions are there. Your fight or flight or freeze reflex, which is your own personal emergency broadcast system, lives there. And then there's this other part of your brain, your prefrontal cortex. That's the thinking part of your brain, the part of your brain that knows you're thinking about something. That's the problem solver, executive function. That's where when you really know what you're doing. When something either triggers you, okay, makes you afraid because you're triggered emotionally, or when you are depleted in any way, intellectually depleted, spiritually depleted, physically depleted, meaning you're just exhausted, that you're living in that limbic part of the brain, okay? And the degree to which you are in that limbic part of the brain, meaning how severely exhausted or afraid or depleted you are, is the degree to which your body is putting these hormones that actually close off access to your prefrontal cortex. Okay, so that thinking part of your brain, you don't have access to when you're in fight or flight. And that's fantastic, right? We are incredible mechanisms. So if I step out in front of a bus, my body does not want me to stop and think, here comes a bus. Perhaps I should step back onto the curb. We don't want my prefrontal cortex involved. We want my limbic system to say, jump back. Okay. So if you've ever been in an argument with anybody and all of a sudden you freeze up, you don't know what to say, it's because you're triggered, you're in fight or flight, and you no longer have access to your prefrontal cortex. So when we look at people who are in such fear right now because of what's going on in the world, we understand that they're not capable of accessing that thinking part of their brain. They're acting in a reactive way, meaning depending on how they're wired, they're going to be angry, right? Fight. They're going to be completely frozen, or they're going to be victim, pull back, and flight motivated. Okay, so once we understand that, I have this little trick that I give my clients that's really, really useful. Imagine that we are all animals, okay? Because we are. That person who's acting meanly and acting out right in front of you is just like a dog or cat or other animal, whatever kind of animal you dig, that is terrified. How would you behave with that animal? I guarantee you it's different than you would behave with another human. With the animal, we wouldn't go in hard. We wouldn't argue with the animal. We wouldn't try to take something away with the animal. We would do everything that we could to calm our energy, to be there, and to show that animal that they could calm down, that things are safe for them. And we don't do that with other humans because we think that we're talking with another prefrontal cortex. We think we're talking with another, person who thinks with executive function. But in those moments of fear, we're speaking with another animal. And so if you treat that person who's fearful the same way that you would treat or go at your dog or you wouldn't get mad at a dog for biting you, right? You would say, oh my God, I scared him. That dog was scared and I approached. So this is a way that we can work with people around us, understand that they are triggered. And by taking your energy to a place that's safe, by listening before you speak, by hearing them fully, acknowledge and validate is a great tool to use in this case. And it's as simple as listening, as Dana said, with kind eyes, just listening, and then let them know that you hear them. Oh my gosh, I hear how terrified you are. I hear how angry you are. It sounds like you were so surprised by that. The moment you acknowledge what somebody's putting out there, even if it feels like they're putting this anger out at you that you have to lean back, if you acknowledge and say, wow, I see how angry you are, all of a sudden that animal inside, the limbic system inside, starts to calm down. I've been heard. So while, Rebecca, we can't control for what's out there, we can understand that people are terrified, and we can do our part in shifting the energy by seeing one another as animals who are fighting for their lives, whether that's true or false. That's what we think right now.
I think that's really helpful. Thank you.
I'm glad you brought it to the table. Thank you, Rebecca. Okay, so we've only got 5 minutes left. And one of the things that we're committed to doing on each of our positive mornings is give you a tool that you can actually walk away with and practice to help make all of these things that we talk about easier, right? Because in order to make positive psychology work, in order to shift energy, in order to show up and calm people's limbic system and calm our relationships, we need to practice, right? Because our brains operate on default as well. And so we're going to give you a tool at the end of each session so that you've got something to practice and play with. And I think what we're going to give you today is something called One Stone. Actually, I know that's what we're going to give you. Dana talked about a lot in her initial content about how what you choose to focus on is what really determines your ability to be happy. And yet, sometimes it's hard to choose to focus on the thing that serves us best. And Dana and I learned this same tool from the same woman. Her name is Millie Grinnell from Oasis in the Overwhelm. She wrote this great little book, 4 60-second strategies to help you de-stress. And our favorite one is one called One Stone. And Millie learned this from Thich Nhat Hanh himself. And he tells this beautiful story of, it was the middle of the Vietnam War, and he was a young monk in Vietnam, and he says, living this rarefied, quiet, contemplative lifestyle. And when the war started coming into the cities, they asked the monks to come and help the people. And so they had to come down from this monastery, and he said, I was ill prepared to deal with the chaos and the fear. And I knew that I wanted to serve people, but I could not focus on what was in front of me because the chaos was so distracting. And so he came up with this tool, and it literally is mindfulness 101. It is a tool that can help you if you practice it regularly, and I mean several times a day. It only takes a couple seconds to train your brain to focus in chaos. And once you've trained your brain to focus in chaos, whether that's internal or external chaos, you can choose to focus even when things are crazy. Okay, so the way we do One Stone, and Thich Nhat Hanh was standing on a riverbank when he taught this, and so he picked up a stone on the ground. I love this because I've got stones all over my house that I've picked up on beaches when we were sailing. But you can use any tangible object, and eventually you could do it without one, but to start with, I want you to have something in your hand to focus on. Anything, I have clients who use their wedding ring, anything that you want to put in your hand and focus on. And there are two parts to this. One is breathing. You're going to take about 10 deep breaths throughout the exercise. That's as long as this exercise takes. Don't want you to count the breaths. It doesn't really matter if you do 8 or 30, right? But I just want to give you that about 10 breaths. And as you're doing that deep breathing, which we know is automatically going to shift all those hormones in your body, automatically turn off the emergency broadcast system, lower your blood pressure, take everything physiologically down. You're going to focus. This is an eyes opened exercise. You're going to focus on the thing in your hand. Okay, you're just going to look at it. So if I were looking at this stone in my hand, and if you were to hear my thoughts, I would be thinking, it's a round stone. I remember where I picked it up on the beach at Orient, and it's flat, and I love when they're smooth and it's white. You're just letting your mind think about the thing that you're choosing, the thing in your hand. I guarantee you, other thoughts are going to interrupt. Your brain is going to go someplace else. My foot hurts. Did I do 10 breaths yet? Is this even working? That's cool. The moment you notice your brain's gone someplace else, you simply make the very next thought be about the stone in your hand. It's a white stone. It's a round stone. Oh my God, is the time almost up? It's a flat stone. I like this stone. Oh my God, I'm talking too much. It's 10 o'clock. It's a round stone. 10 deep breaths. Do it several times a day. And not only do those little breaks help you feel better in the moment, but they're actually training your brain to focus on what you choose to focus on. I'm going to give it back to Lesley to wrap us up for the morning.
So I didn't have a stone, so I was using my pen. Use whatever. That was actually something that you guys taught me right away, which is very, very helpful because I was freezing up and seizing up. My little limbic brain definitely takes over, and I literally couldn't focus on anything. So I just want to thank you all, and I hope you will join us again on Monday morning. Same time, same bat channel, same bat place. I hope you'll invite your friends. Send us, again, I'm going to put in my email there. Put in any notes. What can we do better? What would you like to hear more about? I think we've got the books, Positivity by Barbara Fredrickson, Happier by Tal Ben-Shahar, Everything is Figure Outable by Marie Forleo. We can even make a book club afterwards if we want to. You've got a weekend to read.
Yeah.
So we could pick one of those things and do it. And I'm going to put in here, tonight we have, for those of you who are interested, I have Ginny Brzezinski, who's going to talk about her book. I was supposed to interview her down here at the literary event that was in New Orleans, and she wrote a book with Mika Brzezinski all about comeback careers. And what I love about it, it's really practical. It has not only tips, tricks, research, but it actually has, a list of how you actually speak about your career break or whatever. And considering that many of us may have weird career breaks now, and we don't know what's going to happen, it'll hopefully be more timely than ever. Bring your questions. I will, if you want to put in some questions or send them to me ahead of time that you want to have her talk about. I have one that I took from the list here is how to look for work when no one is working. So I'm going to ask her that to prepare that for tonight. So I hope you'll join us, and thank you so much for being here. And I hope you all have a good, calm, relaxed day. I'm going to do, and I hope you'll do the 3-minute. I love the 3-minute soft eyes. We can do it over Zoom. You can do this with your kids. All of you who are concerned about older kids. I have 2 older kids, and one in New York and she's going from Maine to Massachusetts, freaking out. I love the 3 minutes of just letting them talk and listening and don't say anything. And I'm sure that they will be laughing because that'll be really hard for mom to do, but that's our challenge. I love you all. Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Dana. Love you all. Thank you all for showing up. We'll see you Monday.
Bye, all.
Thank you, ladies.
Bye.
Hope to see you next week. Bye.
Have a great weekend.
And enjoy your afternoon with your activities that you were mentioning, hugging your daughters, baking cookies, going for hikes, all that good stuff.